Disturbing, true fake cop horror stories. This is Mr. H. You're listening to Masked Horror. The Impersonator's Trap. I'll never forget that night. It's been months, and I still wake up in cold sweats, hearing the pounding on the door and those words that started it all. Police, open up. We're responding to reports of a break-in at your property. My wife Erica and I lived in a quiet neighborhood in Texas, the kind of place where you know most of your neighbors, and the biggest crime you hear about is kids stealing Amazon packages as a prank. It was a warm summer night, and we had just gone to bed after watching a movie. The house was silent, the windows cracked open to let in a cool breeze. Then came the knock, loud, aggressive, and relentless. Erica sat up first, clutching the sheets. "Jason, who is that?" "I don't know," I muttered, already climbing out of bed. I threw on a t-shirt and made my way to the door, trying to shake off the grogginess. "Police, open up," the voice shouted again, this time more forcefully. Through the peephole, I saw two men standing on the porch, both in dark uniforms. One had a flashlight pointed at the door. The other stood stiffly, his hand resting on what looked like a gun holster. Behind them was a black SUV with red and blue lights flashing in the grille. "Did you call the police?" I whispered to Erica, who had followed me halfway down the stairs. She shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, why would I?" Something felt wrong. Why would the police be here in the middle of the night, pounding on our door like that? I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lock. "Sir, we don't have time for this," the man with the flashlight barked. "There's been a report of suspicious activity. Your property may be at risk." The urgency in his voice threw me off. My brain told me to trust the uniform, to open the door and let them in, but my gut screamed at me to stop. "I'm not comfortable opening the door. Can you show me your badge?" I called out, trying to stall. The man sighed, annoyed. "Sir, this isn't a debate. We're here to protect you. Open the door now, or we'll have to force entry." I panicked. What if they really were cops? What if something was happening outside that I couldn't see? Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. The moment I turned the knob, they shoved their way in. One of them slammed me against the wall, while the other pulled out a gun and pointed it at Erica, who screamed and backed into the living room. "Shut up and sit down," the man with the gun yelled. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might pass out. They tied our hands with zip ties and pushed us onto the couch. My mind raced. These weren't cops. They didn't act like cops, didn't speak like them. As they rummaged through our home, tossing drawers, dumping cabinets, and ripping cushions apart, one of them chuckled. "Told you this place was perfect. No alarm, no cameras, easy pickings." That's when it hit me. They'd been watching us, watching our routines, studying the house, waiting for the right moment. My stomach turned. How long had they been planning this? Erica was sobbing quietly beside me, her head resting on my shoulder. I whispered to her, "We're going to be okay." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. One of the men came back in the living room, holding Erica's jewelry box. "Where's the cash, guns, anything worth taking?" "We don't have any," I stammered. He glared at me, his hand tightening on the gun. "Don't lie to me." "We don't," Erica cried. The man cursed under his breath and walked back toward the bedroom. The second man stayed with us, pacing, the gun never leaving his hand. Minutes felt like hours. Eventually, the first man returned with a duffel bag stuffed with whatever they could find: electronics, jewelry, even Erica's grandmother's heirloom necklace. "All right, let's go," he said to his partner. Before leaving, the one with the gun leaned in close, his face inches from mine. "If you call the cops, we'll know, and we'll come back." They left, slamming the door behind them. Erica and I sat there in stunned silence, the sound of the SUV speeding away echoing in the night. When we finally managed to free ourselves and to call the police, they arrived within minutes, but it was too late. The intruders were long gone. As the officers took our statements, one of them mentioned something chilling. "You're not the first. There have been reports of a black SUV cruising around neighborhoods in the area for weeks. We think it's a group targeting homes without security systems." That was months ago. They never caught the men. Erica and I installed cameras and an alarm system the very next day, but it hasn't helped me sleep any better. Every time I hear a knock at the door, my blood runs cold. I can't help but think about what they said before they left. "We'll know, and we'll come back." The Desert Highway. I was driving home late one night after finishing a double shift at the hospital. I work as a nurse in Phoenix, and I was completely exhausted. My route home takes me through a long, empty stretch of desert highway in Arizona. It's one of those roads where you can go for miles without seeing another car or even a gas station. The kind of silence that feels like it's pressing in on you. I kept my speed steady, not too fast, not too slow. I've learned to be cautious because highway patrol officers often camp out in this area, waiting to catch people speeding. The road was pitch black, except for the pale beams of my headlights cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw it. Red and white lights started flashing in my rearview mirror. My stomach dropped. I wasn't speeding, and I hadn't done anything wrong, or at least I didn't think I had. Confused, I pulled over to the side of the road. I watched as the car behind me stopped too. It wasn't a marked patrol car, just an older sedan with lights attached to the grille. That should have been my first clue. The driver stepped out, started walking toward me. He was wearing a dark jacket and pants, almost like a uniform, but something didn't feel right about the situation. There were no patches, no insignias, nothing that clearly identified him as law enforcement. He reached my window and gestured for me to roll it down. "License and registration," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. I hesitated. "Why did you stop me?" I asked, trying to sound calm even though my heart was pounding. "You were swerving back there. Just hand me your license," he snapped, leaning closer to the window. That's when I noticed something strange about his car. It didn't have blue lights, only red and white. I've dated a few cops before, so I knew that was unusual. My gut told me something was wrong. "Can I see your badge?" I asked, trying to buy time while my brain screamed at me to do something. His expression changed. Impatience turned into anger. "Step out of the car now," he ordered, his tone sharp and commanding. I locked my doors and grabbed my phone. "I'm calling the police to verify this," I said, my voice trembling. That's when he slammed his hand against the window, hard enough to make me jump. "Do as I say," he shouted, his face twisted with fury. I didn't wait to see what he'd do next. I started my car and hit the gas, my tires kicking up gravel as I sped away. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely keep them on the wheel. He followed me. His lights were flashing again, and his car was closing in fast. I was driving as fast as I could without losing control on the dark, curving road. I dialed 911 and quickly explained what was happening, my voice barely steady. The dispatcher told me to head to the nearest police station, but I remembered the hospital in a nearby town had police officers stationed in the ER. I told her I was going there instead. The red and white lights stayed in my rearview mirror the whole way, but as I approached the hospital's entrance, they suddenly turned off. The car veered down a side road and disappeared into the night. I pulled into the hospital's parking lot, heart racing, and ran inside to the security desk. A couple of officers were there, and I quickly told them what had happened. They took me seriously, immediately calling in the description of the car and the man. I stayed inside the hospital for hours, too terrified to drive home alone. When the police followed up with me later, they confirmed what I already knew deep down. It wasn't a real officer. They suspected it was a predator, someone who had been using the cover of authority to lure people into a trap. But here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. A week later, a woman's car was found abandoned on the same stretch of highway. The window was shattered, and there were signs of a struggle. She hasn't been found. I keep wondering if it was him, if the man who stopped me had moved on to someone else. If I hadn't driven away when I did, would that have been me? Now every time I see flashing lights in my mirror, I feel sick. That night changed everything. The sense of safety I once had is gone. And the worst part, that man is still out there. Sometimes I lie awake at night, wondering how many other cars he's pulled over. How many people weren't as lucky as I was. The night of the vanishing cop car. It was late, too late to be driving alone on back roads in the middle of rural Pennsylvania. But I had stayed at my parents' house longer than I had planned, and now here I was, winding through miles of dark, empty road with nothing but my headlights cutting through the pitch black. My car's clock blinked 11:47 p.m., and I had at least another hour to go before I was home. The road was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. The hum of the engine, the occasional rattle of loose gravel under the tires. I hadn't seen another car for at least 20 minutes, and my cell service had dropped about 10 miles back. Normally, I'd find the solitude calming, but that night, it felt oppressive, suffocating. I was lost in thought when the flashing red and blue lights appeared in my rearview mirror. My stomach sank. I wasn't speeding, and I hadn't noticed anything wrong with my driving. What could I have done? I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder, my heart thudding in my chest. The police car stopped behind me, its lights still flashing. It was an older model sedan, one I didn't recognize as a standard patrol car. But I told myself not to overthink it. Not every small-town department has shiny new vehicles. The officer stepped out of his car and approached mine, holding a flashlight. He was tall, with a neatly pressed uniform, though something about it seemed off. There were no patches, just a plain black outfit with a badge clipped to his chest. He motioned for me to roll down my window. "License and registration, please," he said in a calm, almost monotone voice. I hesitated, but handed him my license. Did I do something wrong? The officer didn't say anything to me. He didn't look at me. He just stood there silently. I found that strange, but I didn't dare repeat my question. His flashlight lingered on my face for a moment before he stepped back toward his car. "Stay here. I'm calling for backup." Backup? For what? I sat there, gripping the steering wheel tightly, watching him through my side mirror. He got into his car, turned off the flashing lights, and appeared to speak into a radio. Then, nothing. He didn't come back. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. I checked my phone out of habit, even though I knew I had no service. After nearly half an hour, my patience wore thin. I glanced back at his car, waiting for him to return, but when I looked back, he just sped off. Did he really take my license and registration and drive off, I thought. I rolled up my window and decided to call the police once I found service. I started my car and pulled back onto the road, my nerves on edge as I glanced back in my mirror. He really just drove off like that. I turned around a bend in the road and slowed down. Something didn't feel right. Did what really happened just happen? Panic started to creep in. I sped up, heading toward the next town. As soon as I saw the first few lights of civilization, I pulled into a gas station and called 911. The dispatcher listened as I explained everything. The flashing lights, the officer, the backup that never came. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Ma'am," the dispatcher said slowly, "we don't have any officers in that area tonight. Are you sure it was a police vehicle?" "Yes," I insisted, though now my voice was shaking. "He had the lights and everything. It was an older car, but can you describe him again?" she asked. I went over the details, the plain uniform, the badge, the flashlight. She was quiet for a moment before she spoke again. "That doesn't sound like one of ours." They sent a unit to meet me at the gas station, but by the time the officers arrived, I could tell they thought I was just paranoid. They took my statement and promised to investigate, but I could see in their eyes they didn't believe me. A few days later, I called the department for an update. They said they hadn't found anything. No reports, no sightings, no surveillance footage. It was like the man and his car never existed. But I know what I saw, and the thought that someone was out there impersonating an officer on a deserted road still keeps me up at night. The scariest part is that he had my license, my name, my address, everything. For days after, I was too paranoid to sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. I kept picturing him tracking me down, following me home, or worse, waiting outside my door. I became obsessed with checking my locks. I double-checked the windows every night, then triple-checked them. I even installed a security system, something I'd never thought I'd need in my quiet little apartment complex. It wasn't just the idea of him showing up. It was the fear of what he could do with the information on my license. Was he going to steal my identity, open credit cards in my name, ruin my life in some way I hadn't even considered? I started checking my credit report almost daily, bracing myself for any suspicious activity. So far, nothing has shown up, but the waiting, the constant sense of dread is exhausting. Even now, months later, I still find myself glancing over my shoulder when I get into my car. Sometimes, when I'm driving alone late at night, I catch myself glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those flashing lights again. If I do, I'm not pulling over. Not this time. If any one of these stories happened to you, what would you do? Let us know in the comments, and check out another video on our channel.